All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I am your host, Don Irvine, and joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, and those dog-faced pony soldiers.
That's right. All right. It's a little hot out there. Weather report.
Yeah, yeah, it's like real summer weather finally. We had a really cool spring here, and so it's finally doing doing the summer thing.
Yeah, I have these mixed emotions about all of this. It's like the cool, wet, springy kind of thing. This was driving me crazy for the sense of my grass was growing, but it was generally too wet, and it didn't get a couple of days of good drying in between. I don't like cutting wet grass. Now if I have to go cut my grass, it's too hot.
Yeah, I hear you. It's always something.
Yeah, so it's one thing or another. But yeah, so we're not officially into summer until I think June 21st or something like that.
Yep.
But it sure feels like it. Sure feels like kind of a typical DC summer. But go out and enjoy. How does this rate for golf weather?
See, I love it. A lot of people don't, but I kind of get the course to myself because people start avoiding it because of the heat. I grew up in Louisiana. I mean, almost every round of golf I played was like this, right?
So yeah, that's what I think. I think that there's some things like this that are like, yeah, look, I'm used to this. All you other pansies, that's fine.
That's right.
You can stay away. I was built for this. Give me the entire course.
That's right. Ball also, the ball doesn't bounce here much, right? Most of the time it hits in the mud, thud, and that's your shot. But this time of year it can get a little bounce. It finally gets hard enough to bounce a little.
They were saying too. I was thinking about just what happens when we get this kind of weather overall across the country too. They're talking about baseball. The offenses heat up too. The
Yeah.
thing for them too. So this cool wet spring has kind of dampened baseball offensive stats.
Right. It's taken like 40 points off the total major league average, the average of all hitters. Last year it was almost 270. And this year it's in the it's in the low 230s.
Yeah, that's a huge
It's a
difference.
whole different brand of baseball,
Right. Yep. For all the sports fans out there, and it's baseball, a great game.
Yep.
All right. Ukraine. I mean, once again, continuing to slog along. We're at day 98. I did think it was interesting. Didn't Putin say the other day? I mean, he was kind of railed against the West for supplying arms. He kind of wanted everybody to stop doing this. And I'm just like, on the surface, I'm like, okay, this shows you're really frustrated that your plan hasn't worked out. And so
Right.
now you're blaming everybody else. It's like, you have to stop doing this because this was not part of our plan to run through this country in 3 days. And you're really screwing this whole thing up for me. And I'm really not happy.
And you had to know that if you didn't get it done in 3 days, I mean, maybe they didn't talk at all about what would happen if they didn't get it done in 3 days, but that people are going to jump in and help them, right? I mean, it's not surprising to us that Western countries are propping up Ukraine in this, right? It's only surprising to them. One thing that happened this week is sort of a dangerous tone. Apparently, he's pretty sick, Putin. And he's worried that he's not going to live much longer. And he, may or may not be justified, but he's in his 70s. I guess he was treated or had surgery or something for cancer, where he actually transferred power, to run the country to someone else because he was going under the knife and not capable and whatnot. And since then, when he was griping about the West assisting Ukraine, one of the things he said is that, we have a ton of nuclear weapons over here, boys. So, y'all do all this with that in mind, So sort of not even a veiled threat, but that he's thinking about, whether and, how it might be appropriate to use nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I mean, this was an interesting development in terms of the report coming out there because the belief, I think, for a long time, especially the way Putin and all the propaganda has always been, is that he's this. He may be getting up there in years, but he's always been the strong, virile kind of guy. Goes around shirtless and all the whole I'm the macho He-Man kind of guy. And I mean, if this is really true that he's suffering from some serious illness, and there's some question about his future health, and how long he survives. I mean, that's another interesting dynamic to this whole thing. For him, that would also ramp up the sense of urgency. I need to get this done while I'm around. I'm not, because I'm not really convinced that there are others, in Russia that really support this move, right? I mean, they just,
Right. So
if
yeah,
something
I
like
was going to
Putin would
say
happen.
my question is, okay, if you were the president of the United States and this was reversed and you were considering nuclear weapons, using nuclear weapons against others, right? There would be some other people. I mean, there's a guy who carries the football. He's not you. He's another person, right? So and we sort of have some, and some of this came out at the end of the Trump administration. Some of the military leaders were actually going to other countries and saying, hey, if this guy goes nuts and wants to bomb everything, we'll stop it. We'll take care of it, right? So there are some layers here to keep people from just going crazy and bombing a country, right? But we don't know what that's like in Russia. We assume that they, if enough advisors were against it, and enough of the country saw the very real danger it would pose to Russia's future to launch a nuclear attack. Well, are there the institutional means there to stop it? Right? What would happen? I don't know. It's kind of an interesting question, because you don't know, what is it like to oppose Putin in Russia?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it does, because it throws into that whole question too. It's like, you know, what is post Putin Russia going to look like? I mean, who
Right, right.
comes in there and fills that void, and what's the direction of that? But you would think that to a certain extent, I mean, Russia's taken a pretty big beating on this. We just, not only militarily, but the economically, and just their reputation for whatever it was worth
Yeah.
before, I think is really in tatters for this, this act of naked aggression here. So, the next person, faces some interesting challenges along the way to try to see, would they try to restore, some of that reputation, or, would they try to build the bridges back with the West, and try to attract the Western businesses back that have left? Would Western businesses who have basically taken, multi-million dollar hits to their business, if not larger, that, would they come back? I mean, would they, can they trust Russia in the future, even post Putin, to say, are we going to go back and invest in this country again, not
Right.
knowing exactly if we'd have to withdraw again?
Right. And the other thing is like, okay, in the US, some people come from off the track to become president, but the pathways are familiar to us. Biden was a member of Congress. Trump was a businessman, well-known businessman. Obama was in Congress. People are governors and so forth, get it, and so forth. That's, they're fairly common paths. And, there are people like Reagan who can transcend it and, come from a path not usually tread, although he had a lot to do with politics for years before he finally won. But what is the path in Russia? I mean, where will this leader come from? Is this an oligarch? Is this some kind of person in government now? Is there a Duma person who's subject to this? I mean, we don't really know. Like, what does the farm system look like over there? Who's jockeying for this? Who thinks that they, looks in the mirror and sees the next leader of Russia, right? And who are all those people? There's probably more than one. And how will that get sorted out? So when you don't have a democracy, when you don't have popular sovereignty, then the selection of the leaders is an entirely different process. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what happens when you have a system like this, where these guys come in there, and then they in essence tried to change all the rules so they basically can rule for life, and as a result, no one really knows what the future is. I mean, China is doing the same thing, and I mean, look, the Castros had ruled Cuba forever, it seemed, but at least there, I guess, even after Fidel, we knew, Fidel kind of turned it over to rule. We knew what was, we kind of knew there, there was something going on there, but it's extremely, you get into Russia and China, and it's extremely opaque in terms of what is really going to go on over there. And so I think that even keeps the experts kind of guessing on this.
Yeah, and to me, it's like it's not uncertain that the Russians shouldn't sort of hinted us where it might come from, because we could do things helpfully in the interim.
So Bob has weighed in here with this comment.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. There is a chance that they could resist it, right? There is some known sort of elements of resistance there, but you don't know, will they dare do it? And if you don't get you go for the king and you don't get the king, you're probably not going to survive very long. So that's another thing. So it's interesting, like, where does this next leader come from, and what direction does he take it?
Yeah, and once again, as I've said before, is we've all learned more about Ukraine than we ever knew before, and we have seen the heartache going on there. But I do love the stories of the resiliency of the Ukrainian people. I love what I see news reports about how they're rebuilding already in some places and things like that, and it's great. It's great to see that they have not lost their spirit. Their resolve is extremely strong. That's the one. This is one of the things about Putin. I mean, he has not been able to break the back of the Ukrainian people, and if he managed to do that, he could run right through the country. But they're standing up to his troops and creating all kinds of problems for him.
Yeah, he's losing a lot of troops and material, and here, I mean, like, we spend $800 billion a year on defense. They cannot afford to do that, right? This game runs out a lot quicker for Russia than it does for us, because they do not have the money to keep losing a war.
Right, and the European Union continues now. That they continue to squeeze them economically. So I mean, the options are getting limited to exactly how Putin's going to continue to fund this war effort of his. So it's very interesting to watch how this is all developing. But it is causing Joe Biden all kinds of problems, right? Because it is actually, we've got that Putin inflation, thing there. So it's
that's right. People would realize what an economic genius he is if only we could get this Putin thing straightened out.
I don't know. I mean, there was a lot made, with the administration has been struggling. We have talked about this for quite a while now, about the inflation problem, and just kind of the economics here, and and how little Biden seems to have a grasp on this at all. You can, at the start of the war and all of these things, you could blame Putin and the war and get away with that. There was something to that in an extent, but here we are, as we said, we're over 3 months into this thing. Yeah. And and you can't keep calling it Putin's inflation problem and things like this. So Biden, they post an op-ed, I guess, in the Wall Street Journal, and I guess it was one in the Washington Post, I hear too. Trying, it's like we're gonna, here's the plan to fight inflation, and I don't know. I mean, I just didn't see anything in there that inspires any confidence in me. And I do, I know I really do want to try to be fair to the president, but it just didn't seem like they had any idea what's going on. Plus, you had Janet Yellen, I guess, saying last night that she admitted she was wrong. She was wrong on inflation, which is kind of a remarkable statement from the Treasury Secretary to come out there and blatantly admit, I was wrong, saying it was going to be transitory, saying that we were going to be able to fix these problems. You're still trying to parrot the administration.
Let's bear in mind that wrong is still a charitable interpretation of what happened, right? It's one thing to admit you're wrong when you're, I was wrong to think that there wasn't money. There wasn't money in this cookie jar I had my hand in, right? I was wrong to believe that it was not there. I thought I was just sticking my hand in an empty cookie jar, and lo and behold, there's cookies. that I then stole, so you know what I mean? So
Right.
it's not a, she didn't get full credit for that. She's also telling what they said. And I've said about this, the biggest advantage, the biggest good thing that's going on in America right now is that all the leftist economic, energy, social policies are getting taken out and given a good, healthy test run, and they are not working, right? Their way of stopping inflation does not work. Their way of managing the energy market does not work. Their way of managing the border does not work, right? So, and everything they try makes it worse. So what that tells you is, forget personalities, forget, who said that 1/6 was this or that or the other. If you want government that works, you cannot keep putting these people in office, right? Their plans, what they are trying to do, and it's not that Biden is unable to work his will. His will is getting work just fine. It's that what he wants to do is destructive to our aims.
Yeah, and one of the things I heard too is that part of this new offensive, I guess, by Biden on this inflation front is just that he was frustrated that his message was not getting out, that all the good that he has done, he's not getting credit for. Which, I mean, for both of us, I mean,
there's no good. I mean, I guess the number one thing they point to, they say, well, they're adding jobs, but like businesses are reopening. It's not growing. I mean, there's negative growth, right? We had a negative quarter last month. Trump had us at 4%, 5% quarters. Biden has us at negative growth, right? You can't claim you're growing the economy when the numbers say otherwise.
Right, exactly. I mean, the thing is that, his main thing has been touting the jobs numbers, and the jobs numbers look, on the surface, they look great, right? I mean, they're very low unemployment and everything like this, but you can't say that and then ignore your negative GDP and the inflation and all the other things. You're not, then you're obviously not being truthful, and the American public seems to be catching on. This whole thing that Biden's talking about inflation. I mean, he does admit, which is true, that the Federal Reserve, is a key part of this. I mean, their ability to raise interest rates, they have to watch that.
Yeah,
I mean,
but they're responsive. They do things, but that's like, did the cops show up fast enough? Well, you've already robbed the bank, right? So it's, whether the cops show up fast enough. I mean, it's better if they show up fast and catch the robber. But the bank has been robbed right before the cops get involved. So I don't know about that. How much of this you can blame on the Fed. The Fed operates, it's part of the government. I mean, they're not out, making policy at odds with the goals of the president.
Yeah, no, I'm my only criticism of the Fed at this point, when once again, this is just hindsight. You can look back and say they probably should have acted a little sooner, when you look at everything. But, the Fed has been around since, what has it been, 1914 or something like that, or whatever. So it has a long history, and they don't always make the right decisions all the time. I mean, that's going to happen. This is government policy is not precise. It's not always hit on the target, but Biden is, he does want to make a part of at least the distinction that the Fed does have a role to play, that depending on, now, if they get too aggressive, Biden's worries is just that, we tip into recession. So he's got to kind of keep his eye on the Fed. I mean, Janet Yellen used to be, part of the Fed, right? So right, she kind of knows that. But then, but the things in his, he's still touting like on his inflation things, like, we're lowering the deficit. Well, we know that's an outright lie from the terms of, it's just that they're not spending all that pandemic spending,
right, has gone off the books. There.
This is not anything that Joe Biden has done.
It's the same as the jobs. It's not anything he did. It's that, the pandemic is ending, and that's in spite of him and over his objections. So, I don't really know, what he's trying to do here.
Yeah, and it's really, one of the things that's curious to me is just that he talks about, he wants to have, build more like affordable housing. Okay, and which is a mantra that we've heard forever and ever and ever.
Right.
But as this
probably
is part
a terrible
of
idea right now.
This is part of an inflation plan, and I'm like, I don't really understand how building affordable housing makes any difference in the inflation. I mean, what's the effect of building affordable housing have on inflation? I mean, it doesn't really jibe as part of an economic plan to say I'm fighting inflation. That's likely. You've got a lot of other things you've got to worry about here. But building affordable housing does not factor into the inflation equation in that sense. I mean, and so
Housing shortage is a myth too,
yeah,
right?
well,
We're
you know,
not
I
we're
mean,
not we're not way short of capacity for housing, and the reason that there are homeless in the country to the degree they are has nothing to do with the supply of housing. It's not, oh well, we've used up every house, buddy. I'm sorry, you'll have to sleep in the street. That's not what's going on.
well, I
So
think, yeah, I mean, I think, if you have these dislocation kind of issues because you do have people that are those homeless people, which are that's a whole nother ball of wax about whether or not they should be out on the streets to begin with. I don't know if we've had this discussion about the mental hospitals in the past and things like that. But
reinstitutionalization,
right,
all
some of
for it.
that, yeah, right, some of that needs to be taken care of. So that creates part of that homeless problem. But where do they migrate to? A lot of these people, they wind up in the warm weather cities, right? Okay, now is there housing in Fargo, North Dakota, or places like that? Yeah, we have the capacity to put houses in lots of places. We haven't run out of space yet, but people,
Barely.
yeah, people are like, well, we have this homeless problem in San Francisco or LA or whatever. Well, then how about maybe if you want to do that, maybe be the Greg Abbott of the world, right? Take those people and work out a deal and send them somewhere else where there's plenty of supply or plenty of capacity to build it, and then put them over there. Of course, you know, they'll be with the homeless people. It'll be governors will be saying, no, 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 no.
Yeah,
Don't
but
send me those
it's
people.
against their will. It's like, okay, you know, it's against our will that you sleep on the street, right? That you endanger the city like that.
Yeah, not that I want to get off on the whole, reinstitutionalization and all that kind of stuff, but I was talking with a couple of my friends the other day, and I said, I've been around long enough in this city that, when we had St. Elizabeth's, as the big mental hospital here in the area, and people were getting institutionalized over there, that when the decision was made to mainstream these people and release them, and they wanted to shut down St. E's because I guess it's cruel and unusual punishment. You can't force them to be there. All the different things that happened during the 80s and 90s and things like that as time went along. And I said, look, I still remember as a young man, in my late teens, early 20s, looking out the corner office that we had, we were occupying for AIM on 14th and 8th Street. And it was in the summer. I was just working for my dad over the summer, and I had a couple of my friends helping me out. And we were like, there was some commotion. It happened a couple of different times. So one time we look out the window, and there is a guy standing in the middle of 14th and H directing traffic. Okay. He's not a cop, but he was somebody, it was like a homeless person. Okay. Whether or not he'd been at St. E's, I don't know. Later on, there was another one that had happened where the thing about where that office was located, it was that the block between H and I, in particular, there, on pretty much almost on both sides of the street, except for the post office, I think that was in the middle of the block, was all like adult bookstores and places like that. Okay, so I had to walk. I remember carting off books that we were sending to members, AIM donors, and things like that. Had to walk half a block up the street past all the bookstores with all the people handing out things for like the peep shows and stuff like that. Strange place for the post office. They wound up in the middle of basically this area. But right across the street, catty corner from the AIM office, was a place called the Casino Royale. And they had all these, it was an adult bookstore, but the windows were such that they were painted windows of like scantily clad women or whatever. And one day during the summer, some guy comes up to that store, and he has like a hammer or something like that, and he starts smashing like every window. So my father, being the curious guy that he was, he assigned one of our interns, an intern we had from Haverford College in Haverford, PA. He assigned him to go figure out what the deal was. I don't know why my father was so curious about this. And the guy basically, he actually went to the DC jail, basically found out the guy had been released from St. Elizabeth's. And he just had something, he just kind of went off, didn't have any real cause or whatever. But these are the problems. This is kind of the beginning of what happens and what we see today to a
That's
large
right.
extent. And
You haven't helped them either.
no, no. I mean, look,
No.
mental illness is a problem. You're not helping them by putting them out on the street. That mainstreaming is not working at all. You
Right.
know, and it creates dangerous situations for a lot of people as a result.
Right.
The public. So anyway, for that aside, but Biden, I mean, the whole thing is it's just that this whole inflation deal for him is still. It's that I just think that there's just really don't have a handle on this. I mean, it's hard. Even the media is trying really, really, really hard to trying to couch this in friendly terms, but the numbers make it very hard for them to say anything. I mean, when you've got the numbers out there, and the voters, I mean, if by
But if
some
you could
miracle.
think beyond inflation, we're really doing good. It's like, well, that's our measure. That's the one we
Right.
use.
I mean, so we've got, so the last month's report was 8.3. I don't know what this month, say this month comes out at 7.5. So shows, inflation, quote, moderating, right? Well,
Right.
so say by November we get down, say somehow it actually accelerates on the downward side and we get to 5%. Is that good enough for the voters in November? I mean, inflation for food, energy, and a lot of other things. I mean, we see that rate, but a lot of us see the price of a lot of the goods that we buy is even higher than that. And then the gasoline prices, I think that's number one right now. I think that affects people even more so. That's probably what, if they're seeing $5, $6, $7, $8 gas in November still or higher, that's a huge problem for the Democrats. Whatever they've got on the map now is going to get even worse for their map in November.
Well, Larry Sabato says that the economic success of the president is baked in May. So like wherever you stand economically in May, you're going to wear that through November. And I think that's not good for Biden or the Democrats because it wasn't good in May and it's not getting any better. And I'm trying to, play the scenario in my head where the economy recovers to the extent that people say, well, Joe's actually handling the economy pretty good now. Do you see that happen? I don't see that happening. I don't see anything that puts downward pressure on energy prices, which is the linchpin of the whole thing. As you said, in fact, Biden was, I guess he was in Japan last week. Was it last week, the week before? And he was asked about the high energy prices in the U.S. And he said, we're going through a transition and transitions are tough and prices are high now, but they probably won't stay that way once we get to the other side of the transition. So in other words, he's locked this in as we're headed, we're going to do it right now. We're going to eliminate our use of fossil fuel, in real time and shift to renewables right now in real time and without penalty. This is the penalty. This is the extent of the penalty, folks. If you can suffer a few more months or, get used to paying $5, $6 a gallon of gas, then we can affect our transition to fossil fuel. First of all, fossil fuels have the capacity to provide about a 10 or 11% of the power. That means, they have enough windmills. If the wind doesn't blow, their effective capacity is like 2 or 3%, right? So, if there's a big, heat wave and you need the windmills and the solar to crank up, you're not going to really get it, right? The last time, like in Chicago, the last time this happened, renewables accounted for 2%. So, you can say maybe it's a little more now, it's 3 or 4%. Okay, but that leaves 96% for fossil fuels, right? So you can't just say, okay, we're sliding the fossil fuel piece out of this picture, right? And we're going to go just with renewables. They're not close. You can't just make up 96% of your energy needs out of thin air. It's not there. But they're going to treat this as a doable, realistic approach to this, and they don't plan to change. So the prices are not coming down for energy or groceries or cars or anything that relies on technology that we suddenly find ourselves short of. Your shortages right now is baby formula, and it may continue to be baby formula for some time, but there may be other things added to the list. That's not going to get better between now and November. It's going to get worse. So, the Democrats are starting to read the writing on the wall. They realize that, absent some, serious incidents that turn things around, that turn voters' opinions around, they're going to get fired for incompetence, and they're going to richly deserve it.
Yeah, this whole thing. I mean, look, I don't have any problem with putting renewables into the mix if people want to use renewables. Because I've said this a gazillion times. I mean, I've got solar panels on my roof, and that actually helps bring down my total energy costs, and that's fine. But the people like Biden and that far left wing of the Democratic Party, all those kind of crazy guys, they act as if we have this unlimited resource in terms of unlimited wind, unlimited sun. That if we need more sun or more wind, we can just flip a switch in essence, and there'll be more sun or more wind or something. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the attitude that they take, is just like, right.
It is.
And so it's really
they mandate it, and they make laws where you can't use the other. You have to close the other plants, right? Yeah. You can't just let's leave it open just in case. No, we got to close it, right? Yeah. And so you got nothing, right?
And for me, they haven't really answered a question in terms of exactly what is the cost of electrifying America in just sparsely populated states where if you want to bring it to everybody. I mean, if you're on Montana or Wyoming, places in the Dakotas, there's a lot of space. I mean, even in just the middle part of our country, the heartland, there's just nothing for miles. It's like, how much money is it going to cost you to, in essence, electrify it so that you could actually have people driving electric cars, electric vehicles that they could be able to charge up and continue their journeys and do all that? It just doesn't seem anywhere close to being realistic. But of course, the Democrats, when it comes to numbers and things like that, they'll never tell us the truth anyway.
Right. They don't care. It's like, we want to do this, and we don't care that it's not possible, or that it's not necessary, or that's not even helpful. I mean, they don't care. They don't see it. They don't weigh that in. And it's like, on the margins, you can get away with that. We're just going to go on good intentions, but we're not on the margins, right? This is the main of America's energy use, the bulwark of our energy use.
Yeah. I mean, I was listening to this guy this car guy on the tech podcast I listened to, and he's a big car expert. He's worked for decades in the industry, and so he has something. He had to drive an EV from, I don't know, he had to get to Chicago or whatever, but he was saying this, at this current time, with a range of about 200 or 250 miles on the average EV, he had to figure out where he was going to charge the car. It's like, okay, I've got to get to this point, but I don't have enough juice in the car to get there. I've got to find something in between, to get me there. And he says, in Chicago, Milwaukee, all those areas, he says there's not a lot. So, it creates all these.
Yeah, you're talking about Kansas. Chicago doesn't have it. Kansas, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is just going to be an ongoing problem. I mean, but the Democrats want to make it think like, EVs, this solves all the problems and everything like that.
It creates a lot of problems. It's, you have to get all that lithium for all those batteries, which it's a heck of a lot easier and less damaging to the environment to get fossil fuels out of the ground than it is lithium. And, we happen to have the fossil fuels. We don't really have the lithium. And, then you have, disposal of it, because, it doesn't go away, and it's just as damaging when you try to put it back as when you took it out. And, you don't have the infrastructure. I mean, you're talking about a bunch of things that are not at all cost effective investments that'll have to be made. And Biden's, fine with government being the one to make those investments. But I don't think that's affordable, especially considering all the competing interests.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that this big move to EVs was considering everything else that we've got going on in the world with just supply constraints and things like that. The price of the batteries has now shot up. Apparently been very stable for years, but now it's really shot up. So that's yet another part of the equation here, is that that if that goes up to the Teslas of the world, well, that's going to be added on to the end price, to the consumer,
right? Which is already more than even the sportiest sports cars, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like $55,000-$60,000 for a Tesla, and like the average for sports cars is like in the low 40s. So I mean, it's, even people who want to buy fancy cars, it's, that's pretty rich, So
Yeah.
the other thing is the engines are about 60 or 70% less efficient than gasoline engines. So that means to move everybody the same distance, you got to make that up. That's 60 or 70%.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many little variables with the
And
EV.
not just this is huge differences. It is hugely less efficient to travel electrically than it is to travel in a gas powered car.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you've got a couple other factors too. If it's cold or if it's hot, and you want to use the heater or the air conditioner, that is going to drain your juice.
Right.
It also then will reduce your range of how far you can travel. So and people just don't think about a lot of all those little factors that go into
Right.
to all of these things. And here comes Bob.
Yep. Central to their policy. Yeah. The market. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean,
All right.
They're putting it all out there for a pig and a poke.
That's right.
They deserve to lose.
So speaking of putting it all out there, so now the Democrats are putting it all out there once again for guns and gun control. It's tragic, but the politicization of these tragedies, it's I don't know, it's disgusting, I guess I could say easily, for what they're trying to do, here on this. But even with Mitch McConnell saying, Cornyn, go and have a discussion or whatnot. I mean, nothing's really going to happen, right, Brian?
Well, it's pretty interesting. So, my first thought I heard about this is that he directed Cornyn to have discussions with Senator Murphy and Senator Sinema on the other side about could agreement be reached on anything. So the first thing I put out was, Murphy's a poison pill, but McConnell puts him in this because he knows that Murphy will never agree to anything that you could get 60 votes for, right? So now, but I have to admit, he surprised me a little bit. So they are talking about legislation that is mental health and hardening schools, and they not gun grabbing, right? We're going to go at the mental health issue, and we're going to go at the hardening of the schools. And there's some momentum behind it. Murphy, Sinema, Cornyn seem to all be saying that there's some progress being made, working that way, and so forth. But what happens when you bring a bill to the floor that doesn't have any gun grabbing in it, right? You might get it past the Senate, but what's the House going to do with a bill that doesn't have any gun grabbing in it? I don't, I think, I know a lot of conservatives don't like the Turtle Man, but he is very good at setting them against each other. And I think that's what's happened here. Is like they're going to come up with a pretty good bill that addresses things that actually cause these shootings. And they're going to have to vote against it. So the Democrats, a chance is going to come up to do something to address these things. And it will be the Democrats who reject it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is going to be very interesting. He put that out there. Says, okay, you want to talk about guns, whatever. You want to do something here, here's what we think ought to be done. We want to really get down to the root of the problem, and part of that is mental health issues, that go along with this. But as you said, the Democrats they don't care about the mental health, and they don't care about like other, they want to take away the guns. And so you're right. If a bill comes to the floor in the House that doesn't have those elements, it doesn't have those things that, what is it, every town and, and all, the Brady people and all these people that, they're on the gun control side. If it doesn't have the things that those guys want in there, the Democrats would have very great difficulty in voting for that bill. But obviously the Democrats want to be, because they want to say, we're all strong for gun control because we all know that gun controls work so well. Let's just look at Chicago. It does so well in Chicago, in other cities. But
they say, well, it's because, Chicago's right next to Indiana, which has Lax.
Yeah.
Okay, then why isn't Indiana a shooting gallery, right? Why isn't that a war zone, right? Because they all have all the guns they need. Say, well, D.C. and Virginia, they just get those guns to Virginia. Okay, why aren't Fairfax County? We had about 1.6 million people here. We had, I think, 8 murders last year. 6 of them are gangbangers and 2 of them are people shooting their wives, right? Those are kind of, you can get rid of those gangbangers. You're going to get 2 people shoot their wives out of 1.6 million. It's going to happen. It's kind of hard to stop. So, it does not appear that it is the armed jurisdiction that is the problem. It is the unarmed jurisdiction that is the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll be interested to see how this goes. I mean, we've got Trudeau. I get his legislation. He wants to ban handguns, right? Ban the ownership, future ownership, the sale, the transfer, something like that. I mean, he's going with that.
Comprehensive handgun ban.
Yeah. And I guess Biden made some remarks, but they had to clean that up a little bit, saying he's not going to be for that. But then again, once again, we don't know what Biden really thinks or understands, because I didn't realize that a 9mm is a high caliber weapon after all. So
yeah, don't say anything about the guns, Joe. Just say you're against them, let it go, because you don't know what you're talking about.
Once again, because he doesn't have, he has to do that off the cuff, right? He's out there, he's all alone.
Yeah.
He's got to do that, and that's the great danger. Is just like, he's trying to throw out these gun facts when he doesn't know diddly squat, and you've got this problem of and so you've got Karine Jean-Pierre. She's trying to clean this up. She's got a tough job. I mean, Joe on the loose is pretty hard to handle.
Yeah. Yeah, well, she's I don't know that she lasts long. She doesn't seem very coherent about all of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was that. I don't know if you saw that thing. I guess what was it? The Daily Mail had reported on the Biden speech at the Naval Academy, and about how, for whatever reason, apparently people couldn't understand why he brought up. He said that he had an appointment to the Naval Academy the same year that he was graduating from Delaware, right? And it had to be, and it was made by the guy that he ran for the Senate against, and and I guess the reporters had asked Karine Jean-Pierre, and she's like, well, I didn't hear the beginning of that speech, that comment, but historian, people who follow Biden, I think people are just like, what the heck? The timeline doesn't match. He's like, what in the heck is Joe Biden trying to do? Was he trying to kiss up to the class of 72 that was there? So he mentioned them, and to try to say that, but it's like, hello, this is something that's pretty easily verifiable, to figure out. It's like, when you were in college and graduating, and you're now trying to talk about an appointment, this is not a graduate appointment. It doesn't exist.
Right. That doesn't exist, right? I mean, he's lied about that kind of stuff. He's lied about, his academic record. He's lied about being on scholarship. He lied about, he still lies about his first wife died in a car accident. And he lies and says the trucker was drunk and crossed the center line. And it's like, no, the wife crossed the center line and the trucker was not drunk at all, had not had anything to drink. Right? Now, why are you lying on this guy? Why are you doing it? This poor truck driver, he didn't mean to be there. He didn't mean to hurt your wife. And you've told this lie publicly on him for decades.
And then
petty meanness.
Yeah. Though I think that would now, with Joe, with where he is now, just that's all he remembers. That story now for him is any lies have become the truth.
Right. The lies have become the truth. That's right.
He can't separate fact from fiction anymore. I think he's totally incapable of doing that. So I mean, I guess the bottom line here really with that is that we're not really going to see much of anything happen in there. So at least McConnell has kind of set a stage to say, okay, let's see what you can come up with. But by at least looking like he's willing to give an inch, he puts
right.
a Democrat.
Right. Republicans came out and jumped all over him. He sold us out, this and that and the other. It's like you can't say to the American people, there's no policy response to this. Continue to march, right? People shoot up schools, kill a bunch of school kids. There's nothing Congress can or should do. Okay. There's an attempt to actually speak to what the problems really are. I guess the president's already said he's not really wild about hardening the schools. That doesn't look like, something that's important to him. So, we'll see. But, I think I think the gun thing is a piece that they can't put it in and they can't leave it out. So I think you'll end up with the regular nothing.
Yeah. All right. SCOTUS leak investigation. So now they want what? The cell phones and a bunch of things from people in the court. Is that what it was?
So yeah, they want to get the cell phone records and social media records and so forth of the clerks for all the justices. I guess they've decided Jenny Thomas didn't do it after all. I think they're pretty convinced of who did it, and they're waiting to see like how this gets reacted to, and they'll be able to tell for sure. But I think they already know.
Yeah. So and we're now we're here June 1st, so we'll have decisions being rendered. I guess somewhat during the month, but majority of the bigger decisions will come right at the end of the month when as the term ends. And of course, we've got the big, case there that liberals have been worried about on the Roe v. Wade type of issue and things like that. But once again, it seems it's like another swing for the Democrats. When that leak occurred and they went all kind of apoplectic and all this, they were trying to rally the troops, hold these demonstrations and do all this stuff, thinking that maybe this was an issue for November. Okay, so that seems to have kind of faded a little bit. Now it's all these shootings, and we had the protests at the NRA convention in Houston. There's some movement, a lot more, the fundraising appeals, all the arguments by the lefty gun control people thinking, and then other candidates are thinking like, okay, maybe I should run on being, sternly against gun control, for gun control, that we need to do something about this. But once again, I think just like these issues are not the issues that are going to resonate with the majority of the voters. It may hit you in a pocket here and there, but more likely, it may get out the vote a little bit more in a heavily in a D plus 5, 10, 15 area or whatever. You just get some more of your troops to come out and vote or whatever. But I don't think that the majority of the people that are going to vote are going to vote because of the abortion case or the gun control case, but it comes back down to economics, inflation, gas prices, those types of things.
I will say this. So we have a leaked Supreme Court decision, which pretty obviously came from the left. We'll find out soon enough. We have 2 mass shootings that both look, one's race, one of them's just mad at the world, I guess, right? But 2 guys who obviously weren't with it, young fellas using the exact weapon the left wants has been wanting to ban for the last 10 years, right? Or 20 years. And these things happen at just the right moment to save the Democrats. There's also, I guess they found a retired federal law enforcement agent who had contact both with the shooter in Buffalo and the shooter in Uvalde before they did what they did. There's also someone, I guess, on 4chan or one of those things that said 13 days before the Uvalde shootings, that 13 days till something happens in Texas. So it's not, there's a kind of a growing movement of people out there who think that there's something up with this. This is coordinated and it's not as isolated and crazy as we think.
Yeah, and I noticed that I guess I should have thrown in there too. I noticed the Washington Post tried to run some articles focusing in on the manufacturer of the gun, Daniel's defense, and things like this. Once again, this is, it's the fault of the gun manufacturer. It's kind of like the tobacco industry. They make the cigarettes, so they're responsible for all of these things. You make the gun, so you're responsible for all these deaths. What they do with this is just, I don't know, it's shameful. They keep trying to connect these dots that don't exist like this, but
okay,
it doesn't.
So here's another one though. You had whole cities burned up and people shot to death. Mr. Dare, I guess his name was, in St. Louis, and others, right, on false things the Washington Post put in the newspaper, right? based on false stuff it put about George Floyd, false stuff it put about racial discrimination, right? You're inciting violence, right? Why can't that be turned against you?
Now that's an interesting thought. I mean, yeah. Look, if you go out, say you're part of even Black Lives Matter or whatever, and you went out and you rioted in any of these cities, whether it's Minneapolis, St. Louis, wherever in the country, Seattle, Portland, and things like this, and then you get arrested, and then you get thrown in jail for 5 years or whatever, or, for this, you know. But the reason that you went out and you did what you did, all the destruction and whatever you did, was because of a newspaper, whether the Washington Post or whether it was a Seattle Times or whatever the newspaper was or media source was. Yeah, I mean, should you not be able to, on that same basis, go back and say, this is your fault, I blame you, I'm going to sue you for
in case of Washington Post, they're deliberately, systematically, running a left-wing attack rag, essentially, right? I mean, they're not shy about it. They're out to get one side and to regale the other, So I mean, it brings about violence. They brought about violence on a number of occasions.
Yeah. So are they inciting an insurrection?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they incited one in early November last year, and nobody did anything about it.
All right, we're at the end. Last word.
Last words. What else do we have on here? Michael Sussman found not guilty. I think I told you in about this time of year earlier in 2020 that if we have not heard from John Durham by the time fireworks go off that year, then we would not ever get anything productive out of it. And that looks like that's going to be the case. That's a lot of tax dollars wasted. I think it's another case where, Trump was good at a lot of things, but he appointed some inept people to some key spots, and it really hurt him. And this appears to be a prosecutor who, likes hearing the sound of his own voice more than he likes building cases that convict opponents. That's really despicable. 2.5 years late, and you've got some lawyer for checking the wrong box, and you can't even convict him. You didn't get it done. They need to shut down and go back to work.
Yeah, at least we did get confirmation about Hillary and Alpha Bank and
we got some little stuff, and that we kind of always knew. But this has the danger of starting to look like the 17 Benghazi investigations, right? That basically all covered the same ground and didn't get at anything. I mean, I don't want that. I think that's bad for us politically. And I think it's bad for us as a nation. Either you have something you can accuse people. Everybody's moved on from Trump, Russia. He was exonerated. The left has had to get over that. We've not really been able to get a lot of advantage out of it. So let's move on and let's find competent people next time.
Yep, and then by this time we should have the official recount in Pennsylvania Senate race. I don't expect any real change in the results, so I think Dr. Oz goes on to November, and hopefully, puts it between now and then, puts together a good enough campaign to retain that seat. We will see.
Yeah, we got to get on his team if he's the guy, whoever it is. You can't have these Democrats in office anymore. They're killing the country. I'm also Mastriano. They're going to go after him as a crazy right winger. It's like that's what the country needs: is people dedicated to conservative principles.
Yeah, I think Mastriano is going to have a much tougher fight. I think that's going to be a tougher race than the Senate race. But politics is one of those things. We have been surprised before, so you just never know, right? The Democrats have gone in there pretty confident in some other areas, and they either got upset or they just won by the skin of their teeth, right?
This definitely looks like a wave election. I haven't seen anything that says, hey, maybe not that big a wave, right? So far, it's all the signs are pointing toward a wipeout.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. And remember, we haven't had, despite the fact that we don't have to wear a mask, we haven't seen this mass wave of deaths. So I'm not quite sure what the Biden administration wants us to put the mask back on.
You were talking about how hot it was. It does appear the winter of death is over, and we survived. So we got that going for us.
Yeah. So anyway, please remember always that we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. We just came off a very wonderful and yet somber Memorial Day, but we have a lot to be thankful for and a lot to be to think of and going forward. And as always, and God bless America. We will see you again next week.